All right, hello everyone. Welcome. So let's jump right in. Let's talk about why the leadership lie that you may have heard, but if you're not in the room, it's the lie that if you are not in the room that you lose control. And that is a huge leadership lie. But the most powerful leaders I know don't need to hover or be like helicopter leaders. They architect culture so well they don't have to micromanage it. In today's workforce, remote, hybrid, or distributed, you either lead with presence or you disappear in performance metrics. Not to say that those aren't important, but we'll change the way you see how you look at leadership, even if you are focusing on performance metrics. So today's episode is not about commanding influence. That's not what we're talking about. It is about commanding influence, but not in the way that you think. And it is about sustaining culture and architecting leadership that doesn't collapse when you're not physically present. And if you haven't already taken the Leadership Intelligence Index, let me say this now. Remote leadership requires clarity and identity. Now, this isn't just remote if you're just on Zoom or Teams or any of the other platforms. That it's not always just that type of remote. I think now that there are people going back into the office space, they're thinking like, well, this may not apply because I'm not technically remote. If you're not physically in the office or in the building or right there with the people that you're working with, you are considered a remote leader. So it's not just about the physical or virtual space. Okay. So when you take the Leadership Intelligence Index, and we'll get more in depth, I'll tell you more about that as we go through the episode. It will show you how you naturally lead in 5 areas and how others receive your influence and where you need to evolve to match the new ways of work. And yes, we still need to talk about new ways of work. So we're going to dive into it. And if you have not, if you don't know, and if you're new, welcome, excuse me, to the Remarkable Edge live show series. This is the Executive Power series. I'm your host, Dr. Vernita Glenn-White. I go by Dr. V, the Brilliant Solutionist and Master Recalibration Strategist for brilliance, authority, and precision. I'm an executive advisor and leadership intelligence architect for high-stakes organizations. So I don't just coach, I don't just consult, I do systematize transformation. So from the education systems to enterprise teams, I've spent 20 plus years helping leaders close the execution gap and build intelligent ecosystems that scale. So this shows where bold execution meets intelligent design and where elite professionals come to rethink leadership, realign performance, and build organizations that actually work. So if you're done playing by outdated rules and you're ready to architect results, let's drive revenue. The results that drive revenue, retention, and real influence, let's get to work. So remote leadership distribution, what is that? It is the shift to hybrid and remote teams didn't just change where we work, it changed how we interpret authority. In a physical space, your presence used to equal leadership, right? So just like in the classroom or in the university settings, if you saw the faculty member around, it's like, okay, that's the person in authority. But what happens when they're not there? Same thing applies in the corporate setting. So what does that look like? We have to understand that performance, communication, and culture have to be engineered and not just assumed. Too many times people are assuming that those things are taking place. Of course, they're going to do performance because they obviously want to keep working, or obviously you want your business to grow. And of course, communication happens because that's what makes the world goes around. That's how we know what's happening. That's how we are talking and collaborating. So of course, communication has to happen. Or I sent the email. I told them what to do that one time. And then of course, we are a quote unquote family or a happy environment. Like this is just the culture. But those things are not to be assumed. I remember when I worked at university, there was the culture of the university, but then there was a subculture within the department. And I'm pretty sure that there are subcultures in your departments, in your teams. And as a leader, those are the things that you need to understand. And if your leadership depends on you being visible or you having to do visual cues to people or be in proximity, then you're already obsolete. And with everything changing in the atmosphere, if you're still relying on those things and you're holding tight onto that old guard of leadership, then just know that you're not going to be there for much longer, or you're not going to get the results that you are looking for. So the office used to be your leadership heavy lifting for you. It used to be like I have to go in and do all of this work, right? But now your thinking had to carry the weight. It's not you being physically present that carries the weight. It is you and how you think and how you communicate and how your influence passes either through your business or your corporation or your department. And that is what is now carrying the weight for you. That is what's leading the charge. So you have to think what remote teams actually need from your leaders. And again, we're not just talking remote in the sense of you got a team on Zoom or is global and they don't have to come into a physical office. If they are in a physical office, but you are not there, or you do have a team that meets up in a physical location, but you're not always there, that is still technically like a remote team. So I want to make sure that you understand that perspective. And so you have to know that your clarity is going to outweigh your charisma. Now, don't get me wrong. We love some charisma. We love a charismatic leader. But when we get down to the nitty gritty and we really want to look at those results and outcomes, we are like, okay, you're cool and all, but I need you to be clear. I need to understand what you want me to do. So you as a leader, where back in the day, your charisma could carry a lot. And we've seen a lot of examples, but then it's like you start seeing the cracks. And if you're not that charismatic, then great news, because if you can lead with clarity, you've already won. And so your team isn't looking for motivational speeches. I know people come in, they do the keynotes. There are people, who are widely known for those motivational talks, and those are great. But what happens around the 45, 90-day mark when that sizzles out? You still need to be anchored in that clarity. So as a leader, you still need to know that, yes, there are times where you need to rah-rah and get the morale going, but morale means nothing if there is no clarity. What your people actually want and what you want as a leader as well is to be stable, to be decisive, and to be consistent. That is what leadership needs. And whether you are hybrid, remote, or scattered across, that is the main drive. And then you have to understand that your trust must be systematized. And yes, you can systematize pretty much anything. And now with our new, well, not new, but with technology coming in and all the advancements, you can still systemize trust. And so you don't have to do all of these standard check-ins like you used to do just to prove productivity. Because if you're doing that, you miss the point. Now, don't get me wrong. I do believe in people like having logs and metrics and, looking at your indicators and are you doing the activities that actually move the needle? Absolutely. But you can systematize that to make sure the task gets done. Now, if you're the type of leader that, I need you to be sitting here, I need you to do these full 8 hours so I know that you get your work done, and you're watching that because you're looking at the clock versus what if they could get it done in 4 hours or 2 hours? Are you just looking at the results? Are you looking at the way of what old productivity looks like? And again, if you're looking at those things like that, you will become obsolete because in today's age, and even before that, if you didn't understand it, but even more now, you can systematize trust by just looking at how am I going to make sure that these indicators, these daily activities are being accomplished. And that goes back to the previous point where I said you have to be clear. You have to have clarity and let your people know this is what I expect, and then this is what I am going to measure, and then leave it alone. But again, if you are the one that has to go and physically look to see if everybody's in the office or see if everybody's screen is on, on Zoom, I may get some backlash for that. But it's like, am I getting the work done? Okay, right? And it's not just about, everyone talks about Gen Z and Gen Alpha coming up. But it's a lot of people who are still in the previous generations who have adopted a new way of thinking, and they think the same way. So you can still, and then I know people that are in millennial stages, and they still have this old school way of thinking. So it's not an age thing; it's just the way you're thinking, right? And then understanding that visibility doesn't mean frequency. You don't have to show up every single day or have your people come in, or you have to have these meetings that just to say, I want you to know, I want to know that you're around, right? That's not what visibility is. It is about intentional engagement that drives clarity and confidence. So if you're still out here meeting, and even on, virtually, do you have to have these 30-minute meetings every single day or every other day or every single week just to say that, oh, I want to make sure that everybody's visible, or I want to make sure that you're not out doing something while you're supposed to be doing this task. Now, it's up to you, but if you, what's more important to you, you getting the results or you making yourself feel good as a leader because you want everybody on these Zoom calls or these whatever you are using for your virtual get together or physically coming to the office. Now, there are some people who need to physically go to the office. They cannot handle work from home. We've seen that. However, there still needs to be some flexibility. You don't have to call them into a meeting, every day or every other day for 30 minutes just so it looks like they are being visible by the amount of time that you're meeting. So a shift that you need to have is you need to move from monitoring performance to measuring alignment. So yes, there's a thing called progress monitoring. You do want to do that, but it needs to be in alignment to what you were clear on, what your goals are, what your objectives are. And if you're finding that your team is all over the place, you have to take a hard look at yourself as a leader and say, am I all over the place? Am I just looking at what I think performance is versus the activities that they're doing? That's are the aligned activities, I should say. So that's the shift that you need to have, moving from monitoring progress to measuring alignment. And then now you have to understand that commanding culture without being in the room, it shouldn't be like, oh, I'm going back to my school example. When the sub is out and the kids are acting, crazy, right? Chaotic, they're not listening. And then you get the report back from the sub and we're like, this is not my class. It shouldn't be that way. It should be things that are structured in place no matter who comes into the room. And then so like I had to work on that. It's like I want to set the tone to where I don't care if no sub ever showed up. I wanted the students to work like clockwork, and regardless of, I want the culture to be set in that classroom and the expectation. And it did happen. It took some work, but it happened. The same thing should be happening in the corporate space. No, we're not treating, full grown adults like children, but there are things that you can set in place to build culture and have it being there without like, oh, here comes the leader, or here comes the manager, here comes the VP or the senior, whatever. It shouldn't be that way. Everyone shouldn't have to say, oh, let me hurry up and scramble, when a certain person comes into the room or to the department or show up on a call. That should be like an undertone that's already there regardless of who's in the room. So you don't lead those teams by replicating in-person habits, and vice versa. You can't take what, you built online, and then if people are coming back to work in the office, you can't do those things. You have to build a system that translates your leadership into that process. It has to translate into that process. Wherever you are, you have to take certain skill sets and adapt them to wherever you are for that culture to happen. And then ask for your team's input on how can we make sure that we keep this type of culture being here, regardless of who shows up and who comes to visit us, right? When you have to understand that culture isn't built at events. There are so many people in the corporate space that are, well, let's have this event, let's have this gathering, let's do this, that, and the other. And they think that's culture, but that's not what it is. It's coded into how decisions are made and how conflict is handled and how wins are recognized. I'll say that again. I don't care how many events you have in your space. I don't care if it's online, hybrid, or in the physical space. The events themselves do not build culture. Culture is coded into decision making, to conflict resolution, and how you're recognizing that you've hit your marks and your success. And then you can do your opportunities for improvement, but it's all of that is embedded. So if you don't take anything else away from that, think about this. What are the sub plans that you can create that your team, your department, your company, whomever can still follow and still get the outcome and the results, whether it's you or someone else that's coming in. So the executive moves that you can take is to replace team surveillance with vision-based scorecards. And I know some people feel some type of way about gamifying things, but they actually work. There's a reason why if you ever play on any of your games for downtime on your phone, and you're like so caught up into it because it's gamified and you're trying to get to the next level. You want to, capture all the whatever tokens you're trying to get, the games, right? And if you're not playing games, think about it, anything. It's like, if you can say, okay, even if you're working out, all right, I want to do a marathon, but if I can do 2 miles today, 5 miles next week, and build upon that, you're gamifying it based on a vision, not just arbitrary targets, but it has to be aligned to your vision. So again, no more team surveillance, like hovering over and micromanaging, because people have done that because they've been burned. They've been burned remotely, and now people are coming back into the office space, or vice versa. You can no longer have a physical space, so now you have to have a remote team. You think you have to hold on tight and do surveillance, but you don't. You can have vision-based scorecards. Again, vision-based, and you as a leader have to define that vision. And then you can use asynchronous, I always get this word messed up, asynchronous leadership messaging to reinforce your values. Now, people can come on at the same time. They can, work at their own pace and different things like that, but they have to understand your values. I did trainings before for certain universities and school districts, and again, school districts sometimes operate like corporate organizations, Fortune 500 companies or Fortune 100 companies, and the disconnect happened because no one understood the values of the university, the department, or the person that was in leadership over them, the values, because all decisions were made through the values. So if you understand and reinforce the values, then that is building that layer of culture, and then that builds that layer of trust. And then build rituals that signal belonging regardless of time zones. Now, again, this is strictly for people who are not in the physical building. If you're going to be that leader that's remote and you do want to build that culture, you as a leader, it may be that you are up at 11 o'clock at night, so that wherever your team is, wherever your team is around the world, they feel included versus always having to read the notes or watch a replay of something. You take charge of that as a leader. And not saying that you have to do this for every single time, but if you want to build that community, that culture, and that trust, these are some of the things that you have to do as a leader. So it all depends on what do you want accomplished, and do you want to retain that talent that you have. You have to do some things that are outside of your comfort zone as well. So if your teams need to see your face and feel your leadership, then you haven't built a culture. You've built a dependency model. Again, if they have to see you to know, like, okay, I see that you're here, now I'm going to get to work. I see that you're here, so now I'm going to put my best foot forward. Then they are just dependent on you. Or if I see you, then I know I need to finish all of these. Again, take this example from, I say her name often, Tracy Hensel. I watched her on YouTube, and she said this phrase that stuck with me when she was raising her 5 girls. She said her role was to phase herself out of a job to build, self-sustaining, productive citizens, right? When her girls grew up to be adults. So she would give them things that would know that she wouldn't have to do, like she would create them self-sustained for them, where all their routines, and she started with them at a young age, and she didn't have to hold on like, well, if I don't do this, then they're not going to think that I'm their mom. She said it to where they're going to always know that she's their mom, but she doesn't have to physically be there to control every single thing that they do. They have their list, they have their tasks and responsibilities. They can do that. And of course, she can come back and check, but she doesn't have to physically be there and tell them exactly what they need to do. That is what you need to do with your teams. You're phasing yourself out of micromanaging. Now, if you're a manager, then that's what you're supposed to do, but you can still kind of fall back a little bit. But if you're at that top level executive, that is not your role. You are there to think and drive the vision forward, and not micromanaging and have people dependent upon you. So remote leadership, regardless, again, remote, either online or hybrid or in the physical space, it is a mirror. And if what you're seeing isn't working, it's time to audit the source. And I'm here to tell you, you are the source. So in the Leadership Intelligence Index, that's where I want you to come in and see it as a mirror. And I want you to use those 10 questions to recalibrate your leadership model and how you are, the model that you're exporting into your teams. So remote work is here to stay, regardless if you are even in a physical building. There's still some things you need to outsource, and you're going to have some remote team members. Again, they may not be there full time, but even contracting, right? So you have to understand that those things are not going away. There are so many people like, oh, I want things to go back to where they were before 2020. We all know what happened then. Don't wish for that. Like, why would you want that? You want people to be fluid and flexible so that you can get the best results. But of course, we don't want, chaos, but there are systematized ways to do that. So the question isn't if you will adapt, it's whether your leadership will evolve fast enough to stay relevant. And unfortunately, we see a lot of people losing their positions, their companies, their businesses because they're not willing to be adaptable and willing to do what they need to do to be relevant. So the Leadership Intelligence Index, it isn't a personality test. It's not one of those, but it is a window into your leadership blueprint. And I want you to use it to identify your blind spots, reframe how you drive performance, and create a presence that resonates even when you're not in the room. So the LII touches on what I call the 5 pillars of leadership ecosystem mastery. So pillar 1 is strategic intelligence and decision mastery. So again, there's 10 questions, 2 questions per category. And then so to understand pillar 1, you have to ask yourself, do you truly understand that leadership isn't about reacting to change, but that it's about anticipating, predicting, and shaping? See, this is why you don't have time to micromanage, because you need your brain to be able to look at things at a bigger picture so you can anticipate, predict, and shape. Pillar number 2 is about scalable leadership structures. And ask yourself, do you realize why traditional leadership programs fail? I'll tell you why. It's because they only develop individuals and not systems. Now, a lot of people develop systems for the sake of developing systems. You have to build systems intentionally, but so much time and effort are put just in people development and not in systems development. You need both. But most people, when they come out training, they only focus on people. Then when the people leave, then they're still stuck, and starting from ground zero. And we don't want that. We want systems in place, again, regardless of who comes in, things are still operating smoothly. The third pillar is leadership content knowledge, which is industry fluency. Now, I studied leadership content knowledge extensively when I was in the education space in my doctoral studies and all of my research. And I see how it is needed across industries, because one of the biggest gaps that I saw in leadership consulting is that many executives are leading outside of their domain of expertise. It doesn't mean that you're not brilliant, that you're not smart, you're not capable, but you're probably operating in a space that's not in your wheelhouse. Not saying that you can't learn, but if you're wondering, like, well, what is happening? There are some things you need to do as a leader, and it does start with your leadership content knowledge. And then the pillar number 4 is AI and digital adaptability, but without the hype. This is not to like scare you and say, oh my God, AI is coming for you. That's not it. So there's no need to fear any type of AI or whatever is coming up in the new technology, right? There's always been new technology coming around. Just right now, AI is front and center. But you have to understand that it is just a tool. It doesn't replace, it's not a replacement for strategic intelligence, but don't be fooled. So I'm not here to say, oh, don't worry about it. It can't replace you. It can partly if you're not putting yourself in the position. So there will be aspects of your role that will be replaced if you aren't innovative or adaptable. So keep that in mind. So it's nothing to fear, but just understand that you got to kick it up a notch and you cannot remain the same. And then the 5th pillar is talent optimization and retention systems. And if you don't know, the silent multi-million-dollar leadership problem is talent attrition, and that's due to weak leadership structures. Now, I'm not calling anybody a weak leader. I'm saying that your systems may be weak, and that is telling another story. So you have to stop personalizing your leadership and the feedback that you're getting and look at your systems. When I was, even as a leader, in my own space, I had to look when I would get certain feedback and anything. I was like, I could be angry and upset, but I said, well, wait a minute. What about this made them say that? And then I had to look at the things that I had in place or what I presented, this, that, and the other, and then understood that it was a system. Now, of course, you're going to have some jerks and they're just going to, people going to people. But for the most part, you take the personal, you stop taking it personal and then look at the system and say, well, how can I make this system be better so that I can get the desired results and then answer what they are saying. All right. So go ahead and start with the Leadership Intelligence Index and start the conversation that matters with your team, with your board, even with yourself. So make sure that you take it, the description, the link is in the description, or you can check the feature section on my LinkedIn page. Be sure to direct message me or comment down below with any questions that you may have or any insights that you may have about this episode. And I will make sure that I get back to you, because I want to make sure this monologue turns into a dialogue so that we can move your company and organizations or your business forward. All right. So I'm Dr. Vernita Glenn-White. I go by Dr. V. And that's how remarkable leaders rise. And until next time, be sure to stay on your edge. Bye.